Today on Have You Played? We go absolutely postal with Postal 4. No regrets. And then, hop in the hoopty. We're taking a road trip to the Great Wide North in Death Road to Canada. Ready or not, it's game time! And now, please welcome your ever-incredulous and audacious hosts, Andrew Taylor and Matt Hall.
Gamers, rise up and get ready for the first episode of Have You Played?
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Matt.
And today we're going to be checking out a couple games. I'm going to be presenting Death Road to Canada.
And I will be looking at the Tuesday update of Postal 4, No Regrets.
And make sure to stay tuned for the top 5 horror games that Matt has started, but didn't complete.
They were too spooky for me. But stay tuned for all that and more. First, we're going to be checking out
Death Road to Canada. Postal 4!
Postal is the video game series that Jack Thompson warned you about. While a game like Grand Theft Auto lets you gun down civilians, Postal lets you douse them in gasoline, light them on fire, piss out the flames, lop their head off with a shovel, and then when the police come to apprehend you, you can take that severed head and beat the cops to death with it. Also, there's dick and ball jokes everywhere. The first game in the series dropped in 1997 and was a top-down isometric shooter that ended with the protagonist, known only as the Postal Dude, attempting, unsuccessfully, to shoot up an elementary school. I should note that in 1997, mass shootings weren't commonplace in America. This was 2 years before the Columbine massacre, but this scene still firmly cemented Postal as a super edgy and controversial game. Senator Joe Lieberman named it one of the worst things in America at the time, right alongside Marilyn Manson and those Calvin Klein underwear ads. After making the jump to a first-person perspective with 2003's Postal 2, developer and publisher Runs with Scissors outsourced development for Postal 3 to a Russian company named Akela. The resulting game was so bad that Runs with Scissors has removed Postal 3 from their online store, stating that it was in the best interest of the Postal community to do so. Fast forward to 2020 and Postal 4 No Regrets, and I really hate that title, is being touted as the true successor to Postal 2. Postal 4 entered early access on Steam back in October of 2019, but even after learning that Runs with Scissors wasn't to blame for the abominable Postal 3, I still wasn't ready to plop down $20 for Postal 4. Now, I have a real soft spot for Postal 2, but I can't deny that the game is full of problematic and poorly aged humor, kind of like a few other old PC games that I have a soft spot for.
I think my dinghy hanging out.
I felt burned by the total crap fest that was Duke Nukem Forever, and while the Shadow Warrior reboot was a decent game, it really didn't hold my interest very much after the first few levels. However, for some reason, after seeing Postal 4 go on sale several times, I finally decided to pull the trigger and reignite my relationship with the Postal Dude. The game is still in early access, and we're currently in the alpha stage of development. Runs with Scissors went the early access route not only to raise funds, but also to try and get the Postal community directly involved in the development of this new game. I'll just come out and say it though, in its current state, Postal 4 is a buggy mess. But let's set that aside and just kind of see how things are coming along anyway. The Postal games see you living a week in the life of the aforementioned Postal Dude. Each day begins with a to-do list and some errands that you must complete before tucking in for the night and starting the next day. For as much potential violence as these games offer, there's a lot of humor in how incredibly mundane and boring many of the actual objectives are. Much of it is entirely non-violent, and you can even complete a pacifist run of Postal 2 and its Paradise Lost DLC. This time around, the Postal Dude is voiced by John St. John, someone who you might know better as Duke Nukem. Trying to do my best Duke for you there. The Postal Dude and his faithful canine companion, Champ, are left homeless after someone steals their trailer. Down on his luck and low on cash, Postal Dude has to find a job. Now, I'm going to run through the Monday stage of the game as it is right now in the current build and give my first impression of things. Shortly after taking control of the postal dude, I stumbled upon a piece of cardboard and a permanent marker, which I then used to make myself a sign. I went about the city to look for work, and after many failed attempts, a kind soul finally directed me toward the local job agency.
Excuse me, do you happen to need any dirty services performed?
If you want work, go see Mr. Below at the job agency. Get out of here, freeloader.
Now that's job hunting well done.
I made my way in and was greeted by the sleazy Mr. Joseph Below. He offered up 3 different jobs, one at the local prison, one in the sewers, and one assisting the local animal catcher. The whole time he was talking to me, it was clear that something unsavory was going on behind the counter.
I've got all the right connections in this town to put you into the right positions where you'll be obediently performing your duties, assuming you have the right talents, of course.
However, when I went to investigate, it appeared that Mr. Below and his pet had vanished into thin air. I couldn't even find the door that he came out of when he greeted me, but whatever, let's just get to that first job. The local animal catcher, and I am using air quotes there, is looking for someone to help round up neighborhood dogs and cats. I'll just cut to the chase. This guy lives in a van and eats animals. An absurd premise, but I'll take it. I need to bring him 5 cats and 5 dogs. Now, I happen to have 4 living cats along with 1 dead cat on my person at the time, so I dropped them into the chute and went out to catch those dogs. And if you're wondering why I had cats in my inventory, it's because you can use them as a silencer on your firearm. It's just a postal thing. You can lure a dog by dropping a dog treat in their line of sight, and once they eat it, they will follow you, seemingly indefinitely. But the catch is that you can only lure 1 dog at a time, and even though they all happen to be almost directly in front of the animal catcher's garage, this task is incredibly tedious. You're basically just walking back and forth for 5 minutes, and there really isn't any degree of fun or challenge involved at all. After making sure that Mr. Animal Catcher has had his fill, I head to the sewers to check in on that sub-service sanitation attendant position. I meet the foreman and he sends me out to complete 3 tasks. Change some light bulbs, unclog some pipes, and replace some pump parts. I decide to look for those pipe parts first, but there's platforming in this area that I just don't want to deal with, so I go to unclog some pipes instead. To unclog a pipe, I have to take my shovel and hack at these giant piles of shit until they break down enough to let the water flow through the pipes again. Lucky for me, there's plenty of platforming in this area too, but surprisingly, the controls are decent. I'm really not one for first-person platforming, but this didn't frustrate me at all, and the controls were much tighter than I thought they would be for this early access game. Next up, I go for the light bulbs, and how fucking strong are these rats? Anyway, this section sees you navigating sewer tunnels and moving around crates to block harmful steam sprays or to give yourself a little extra height when you're trying to reach a bulb. I run through this area without much trouble and decide to head back down and get those pipe parts replaced. There's alligators in here that killed me in what seemed like 2 hits before, but as the water levels go down, they're much easier to see, and I wind up sniping all of them except for this guy who comes out of nowhere and legitimately scares me, but I finish him off with relative ease, get the pump parts replaced, only to find out that my pay is going to Mr. Below. So, feeling screwed and still low on cash, I have nothing else to do but head to the prison for my final errand of the day. It's around this time that I decide to try the vehicle in the game, and it's also around this time in the review where I realize I'm constantly switching between past and present verb tense, but I didn't really proofread this, so get over it. The vehicle in this game is a scooter, and it goes pretty well for a while, even though this happened, and I did get stuck in some rocks for a while. But after that, it was smooth sailing. It wound up taking me 9 minutes to even get near the prison, and then I took a spill that completely defied the laws of gravity. A woman, presumably someone who had paid for Postal 3, decided to take advantage of the situation, causing a gunfight to break out in front of the police station. Somehow I was able to get down, and I just decided to make the rest of the trip on foot. After a quick detour through the police station to stock up on some guns, I finally got to the prison. Turns out a series of cell blocks need to have their security lockdowns manually overridden, meaning that for the first time in the game, I actually get to shoot people without penalty. Aside from a couple gunners up in the catwalks, I barely caught a scratch in this part. but I did have fun with it. I finally got to dip into my arsenal, which, in addition to oddball weapons like the pigeon mine and the makeshift flamethrower, consisted of a pistol, a shotgun, an assault rifle, and my current favorite, the revolver. This thing has a little meter that fills up with every successful shot, allowing you to use the alt fire to target up to 7 headshots in rapid succession. I cleared out the prisoners, was informed again that I was getting screwed on my pay, and somehow teleported to an entirely different room after a loading screen. I was done for the day, but still had to spend a full 8 minutes getting to the hotel where I could progress to the next part of the game, and that's a huge complaint I have right now. The map is too big to not have a decent vehicle, and you don't even have a sprint option. You're moving on foot at a very slow pace, and the vehicle is really buggy right now. 8 full minutes just to get to the end of the level after I had finished all my tasks, and I'm actually playing that trip right now, sped up in hopes to relieve some of the monotony of the experience, but also to try and communicate how tedious this is. In its current state, playing through the story is really boring at this point. I love all the dick and ball jokes, but what I'd really love is some action. There isn't any music in the game yet, and sometimes the dialogue has this weird buzzing all over it. And in fact, the whole game has a lot of weird, annoying, high-pitched sounds throughout. There's an appearance from one of my favorite YouTubers, and I'm willing to bet that the full game will be loaded with lots of Easter eggs and jokes and more insane nonsense, but unless you are a hardcore Postal fan, I can't recommend getting in on early access at this point. The promise and potential of what Postal 4 could become over time is very exciting to someone who really likes Postal 2, but if you're new to the series, stay away right now, it's just going to turn you off. I would recommend getting Postal 2, get the DLC, see how you like it, and if you become a big fan of Postal, try the early access, why not? Throw them a few bones and support it, but if you're new to the series, it is not a good first introduction. The game really needs a lot more work. All that aside, like I stated at the start of the review, Postal is a series that has long aimed to shock and disgust people. There's a good chance that you're not playing Postal 4 to run errands, you probably just want to fuck shit up. If that's you, you'll be pleased to know that Postal 4 gives you plenty of opportunities to do stuff like this.
That's supposed to bend that way.
So that is Postal 4 in its current state. Andrew, have you played Postal 4?
I haven't played Postal 4, but I gotta say, it looks really interesting. Learning the origins of it, having like, got my little notes here on my phone. The ending of one of the first Postal games was you shooting up a school. Do you take control of your character doing that?
You try to shoot up a school, but...
Is it the joke you're so bad at it that you can't?
No, I believe what happens is you're hallucinating and you have a psychotic break and you can't actually fire your weapons at all.
Okay, in the clip you showed, it looked like the guy's shooting and he just can't get...
Yeah.
Are those kids? Is he trying
Those are kids. The game was remastered as Postal Redux, and they did take that stage out. It was just kind of
Like,
in
whoa.
poor taste, if you can believe it.
I can't believe if something got to be too bad for Postal. It seems like a lot of the mistakes and stuff they would leave in because they're funny, and it's kind of hard to tell. It makes me wonder is like you mentioned in the trailer while we were just watching it that they censor your dick as you're pissing, but that's not actually in the game.
You don't actually see the Postal dude's dick at all,
Is
unfortunately.
it censored? I'm really bummed out about that.
Yeah.
That lost me. Loses a couple points. So you don't. What is it? Just the same censored thing?
I think you just see a piss stream coming out of the bottom half of the screen.
Like Conkers? Did you play Conkers 64?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's similar to that.
All right.
Except I think in Conquer you do see genitals.
Is there?
Isn't there a giant dick in Conquer?
I don't think so. There's the Great
No,
Mighty. Great Mighty Pooh.
There's the flower with the giant
The
tits.
big
That might be what I'm
titties,
thinking
yeah.
of.
I think about that very often.
Well, anyway, that's Postal 4. What do you have up for us next?
Well, Matt, not very similar to Postal 4 at all. We have actually one of my favorite games, Death Road to Canada. Man, this game feels so huge I don't even know where to begin. Death Road to Canada is a 2016 indie game supported by crowdfunding that comes from Rocket Cat Games and Mad Garden Studios. While this isn't fully accurate, the game has been described as Oregon Trail with zombies. Not to be confused with Oregon Trail, though there are some similarities. Death Road to Canada sets your custom character in beautiful Florida, USA during a zombie apocalypse. You catch wind that Canada is supposedly safe from the zombie scourge and decide to make your way there, as there's nothing to lose in the Sunshine State. Basically, you're tasked with surviving the treacherous 1,500-mile trek north from a Day to Remember's homeland, which can take about 15 days, depending on the difficulty setting. You'll find loot, deal with broken down cars, explore abandoned buildings and cities, meet doggo companions, find some really weird stuff, make some friends along the way, and most importantly, fight for your life against armies of the undead. But Death Road to Canada takes a much more hands-on approach to your survival, as you take control of your character when you stop on your journey to restock on loot. You, that's right, you are in charge of your fate, using weapons you find or buy along the way, be them broken 2x4s or if you're lucky, even chainsaws. As fun and creative as the action can get, Death Road to Canada is just as much, if not more, a strategy and management game. As you progress on the northern path, you will encounter people, and sometimes not people, that you can recruit to join your party of up to 4 zombie slayers. You can control these characters during the on-foot sections, but what's truly frightening is the sections where you can't control them. What really sets the game apart and makes it a lot more interesting and compelling is that every character has their own unique set of stats and skills that comprise their personality, that ultimately dictate their behavior. Each character will also have a trait and perk which you can unlock and upgrade for your own characters. Along the road, you will encounter many events. These events range wildly, and even after all my time with the game, I still ran into new ones. An event is a randomized scenario you and your team have to deal with. It can range from stubbing your toe to being harassed by violent bandits who will kill you and steal your loot without hesitation. These events are where your character's personalities and skills really come into play. Something you'll encounter very often is car trouble. Cars just don't seem to work how they used to, and often break down, forcing you and your squad to move on foot, fully exposed to the dangers of the eastern US. But there is hope, as some characters can have skill in repairing, as noted by their mechanical skill. Proficiencies with these skills are denoted by these cute little faces, 6 of them in total, ranging from worst to best respectively. Depending on your character's skill, you can attempt to fix the car, resulting in many outcomes, kind of like a D&D dice roll. Maybe you're unsuccessful, maybe you mess up and hurt yourself, or maybe the car roars back to life in triumph, raising the morale of your party. There's a lot more to how the actual guts and mechanics of the Death Road to Canada stats system work, so I'll only focus on the basic things. There are many options you have in scenarios depending on the stats and qualities of your team, but even still, going with the choices that seem like a sure thing can still backfire and ruin your trip to Canada. Take my character, for example. I gave him the paranoid trait, entirely not based on real life in any way. Basically, this means that my character always kind of has one eye looking behind him to make sure that everything's okay, and he's never fully trusting of any situation, even ones that seem safe. This can be super helpful for scenarios when, say, the building catches on fire and I have an escape plan. getting us all to safety without losing anything. But this can be a bad thing when we're camping down in what actually is a safe place to stay for the night, but my character is a little bit too worried and we drive off in the middle of the night, preventing us from getting any sleep and making us tired and drowsy the next day. All the stuff related to this actually feels so vast that I'm not really sure what to say about it. It took a long time of trial and error before I started understanding the system, but it never really felt unfair. Oh, and yeah, trial and error is the name of the game here. You will fail a lot. I don't think I made a successful run to Canada until maybe 15 to 20 hours in. But during that time, I was not looking up anything in the Wikipedia or anything like that. I was just kind of playing it casually. But still, I think I got the game shortly after it launched, and I remember feeling like I'd never make it to Canada. I played a bit, then stopped for a while and returned back to it in late 2019 and noticed many changes. They've incorporated this Zombo Point system.
Welcome to Zombo Point,
where you can find and collect these floating zombie head things to spend upgrading and unlocking perks, traits, and characters, and all that good secret stuff. Before this, you just accumulate skill in those perks by using characters with those perks. So this is a huge benefit, especially if you like to create characters that you run into in the world that have stats that'll help you on your journey, but that you wouldn't quite enjoy playing as. The character customization, I think, is actually pretty great. There aren't millions of options, and all the faces kind of look silly in a cute way, and I feel like there's more than enough options to make characters that are recognizable as you and your friends. That's probably the most fun I had with the game, was creating a ton of my friends in-game and seeing if we'd survive. I actually even made a bunch of characters from Trashburg, and Matt and I recorded ourselves trying to see how everything played out with those characters, which you can check out right here and in the description. I remember seeing an option for multiplayer, but never really thinking about it until one day when my friend Jordan was also playing Death Row to Canada after seeing those videos that I mentioned before, and it gave us the option to join each other's game. Jordan and I were actually living together when I first got Death Row to Canada, and I remember playing a couple rounds co-op on my PC, and it played pretty well. Essentially, the first player plays like normal, and the second player just chooses who they want to play as from the party. Weirdly though, there's this thing where player 2 can't go through doors. Only player 1 can, and then there's a small delay before player 2 and the rest of the squad emerge from the door. So you're kind of always playing catch-up, and player 1 has to be very careful not to trap the other guys in a bad situation. And I'm happy to say that online play worked pretty dang great as well. Unfortunately, it seems like the game's only harder when there's more people, but it was still really fun.
God! No!
This game has a tremendous amount of replay value. There's a multitude of game modes to try, and they offer a lot more than just making the game harder. Familiar Characters mode draws more characters that you've made in your custom characters list to be in your run. Rare Characters mode, that's one of my favorites, has you interact with more silly and wildcard characters that can be extremely useful or detrimental to your run, like Horse, Link, or Cloud. Short Trip to Heck is a more condensed and quicker experience, while a long winding road is a longer but eventually more difficult experience. And then there's the Deadlier mode, which is pretty much just the hard mode, but unlocking that, it unlocks the harder versions of the other modes and a couple other modes. There's just so many modes. Modes! Boy, let me tell you, this game is dripping in charisma. There's these recurring silly themes that always get a chuckle out of me. It makes me wonder if the game devs are actually obsessed with bodybuilders and lifting, because there's so many interactions and quips about lifting and being huge. Even when events go sour, when I see that horribly low res pic of the skeleton after the red flash, it still makes me grin reluctantly as my group grows closer to death. One thing I noticed is that at first, it seems like the backgrounds when you're traveling have like palm trees that are typical of, Florida and Southeast United States. And then things slowly start turning into pine trees and stuff that you'd see as you get closer to the northern border and to Canada. I've really had a lot of fun with this game, and I feel like fun is the best way to describe it. It really feels like you never know what's going to come at you next. Even doing research for this video, I saw so many things on the wiki I had never experienced in game, which just makes me want to play it even more. Anyway, Death Row is only like $15 on Steam as well, and I'd really recommend it. It delivers way more than a $15 indie title could, and its charm is undeniable. Go be too swole to control and never ever cool it. All right, Matt, that was Death Row to Canada, one of my all-time favorite games. Please don't say anything mean about it or I'll take it as a personal offense. So Matt, have you played Death Row to Canada?
I have to admit, I did.
What?
I played it with you.
Don't touch my hand like
that. Was
that.
really weird. I enjoyed the game. Seeing that review, I noticed a lot of things that totally went over my head the first time. Mostly because playing games with you is not fun, and I just get very stressed out.
Yeah, I get it.
No, but even things like the landscape changing as you got closer to Canada.
That's cool, right? They didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of little, like, it feels like such a small game, but it's actually such a big game.
Yeah, it's something I've noticed with a lot of like modern PC, like indie roguelike kind of games where they'll take a relatively simple concept that you can expand on almost infinitely by adding just different variables and factors. So
More
it's like
RNG, yeah.
the game is relatively simple. I mean, you drive, you go to a place, you get out, you try to find loot, you kill some zombies, you
Stay
come
alive.
back, and you hit scenarios. But like, all those elements can be infinitely complex depending on what happens. One thing I want to ask was, how is Link and Cloud in the game?
I think the short answer is they just do it.
Okay.
And they have mechanics that are appropriate to them, and sometimes they have little story arcs where, like, the more you use them, if you raise up as like Cloud was really weak when you first get him, but if you use him a lot, his strength will increase, and you can also like bring it to a trainer and stuff, which like makes him incredibly, like, his ceiling of strength is way higher, but he starts lower than most people. So it was really cool. It's like a bunch of mini games and things that they added in.
It's hard for me to think of Cloud without picturing the old Final Fantasy VII magazine ads where they showed his tight little ass. Do you know?
Is that like the cover of the game where he has the Buster Sword and he's looking up at the
It could
city
be.
or whatever? All right.
I just remember those cheeks were very well rendered for a game character at the time.
But yeah, it is just like your character. You don't get armor or anything. You get different weapons, but the animation is just you hop up and down as a 2D character, as a 2D image, and your weapons are just on like a pivot. You know what I mean? They just do this. But it's there's a lot to it, and it's really, for $15 they did so much. You know what I mean? I think there's DLC as well.
Seems like a decent game to get into if you want something you can just sink a ton of hours into without getting bored.
Yeah, it was definitely really cool. If you liked like Oregon Trail and you wanted to take a more modern spin on that, where it's a lot more action focused, Death Road to Canada is your game.
Well, since it is spooky season and we did just talk about a very
Horrifying
terrifying game, I'd like to now present the top 5 spooky games that I started but just didn't have the balls to finish.
As a true hardcore gamer, I play a lot of games. But sometimes a game is too gruesome, too horrifying, or too outright spooky for even hardcore gamers like myself to finish. So here's my top 5 spooky games that I started, but I just couldn't finish.
Number 1.
Sweet Home for the Famicom. This is a Japanese RPG that is essentially the predecessor to the Resident Evil series. I'd been wanting to play the game for quite a while and recently got my hands on a fan-made English translation patch. However, as soon as this ghost showed up, I had to put my controller down. Even though the game is only 8-bit, the spooky vibes made me pixelate my pants in record time. No, I'm just kidding. I haven't had the patience to get through this yet because I realized I'd be having to switch between 5 different party members who all have unique abilities, and I'd do a bunch of puzzle solving, and I'm just not ready for all that. Just yet. But soon. I hope.
Number 2.
The Evil Within 2 hit consoles and PC in 2017. A sequel to The Evil Within, the game sees the protagonist from the first game return to experience a bunch of more weird shit. I was somehow able to muster up the courage to play through Evil Within on Xbox One, and it's a stellar title. However, about an hour into the sequel, I got stuck on the stealth part, and it seems like no one else online had any issue with this part, but I died about a dozen times before turning the game off, and that was 2 years ago. I really fucking suck at being stealthy in games. Except for Skyrim, but that's cheating.
Number 3.
Splatterhouse was originally released in the arcades between 1988 and 1989. The game has seen its fair share of ports and sequels, but lately I've been trying to get through the North American arcade version of the game. This gory beat-em-up sees our protagonist, who is totally not Jason Voorhees, trudge through a literal house of horrors. However, between the unforgiving checkpoints and sluggish controls, I have yet to make it past the first stage of this game. What the fuck?
Number 4.
Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I have started this game on so many occasions, and every time I find myself completely overwhelmed by it. Which is strange, because I've gone to some extreme lengths to complete my inventory in its spiritual successor, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. This is the kind of game that I know I'm eventually going to love, but I need to be in the right mindset to dedicate myself to the controls, combat system, map, and the cryptic bullshit everywhere, and wherever the hell this is.
Number 5.
Last, and also least, Resident Evil 5 is the direct sequel to Resident Evil 4, which is one of my favorite games of all time. I don't really have much to say here. I played the game for about an hour, and then I came to the conclusion that it totally sucks. And I haven't played it since. What's a spooky game that you've started but were never able to finish for whatever reason? Let us know in the comments, and I don't know, I'll make fun of you for it or something.
Well, that's pretty much our show for today, but before we get out of here, I do want to ask Andrew, what have you been playing lately?
Oh man, Matt, I've got Warhammer fever. There was a Warhammer MMO called Age of Reckoning that... Anyway, as I was saying, I do have Warhammer fever. There was a Warhammer Fantasy MMO called Age of Reckoning that came out. I remember playing it a couple years back when I was still in high school. I enjoyed it a lot, but it kind of saw the end of its days and the servers were shut down. But in 2018, I'm actually 2 years late to the party, I'm pretty sure, some gamers and developers got together and they are hosting a server where you can play the game again. It's called Return of Reckoning. If you want to give it a shot, just go to that website. It's totally free, no subscription, and it's pretty good, you know what I mean? For people that are doing it for free, I don't even think they're accepting donations. It runs really well and I'm having a really good time with it. And I'll present you the same question, Matt. What have you been playing recently?
I have been getting into mobile gaming for the first time ever.
Fake gamer!
That's how I felt, but I said it's been long enough that I think there's gotta be some good mobile games out there at this point.
There are.
So I have been playing a bit of the mobile version of Stardew Valley.
Okay.
Which translates really well.
It seems like that would
mobile.
be. Yeah.
But what I've been playing a lot of is South Park Phone Destroyer, which is
is that good? I've never really, aside from barring the South Park N64 games, which are kind of hit or miss, seems like every other South Park game, they've taken it really seriously and they've been pretty good games. Is that the same case for the
They
mobile
had
one?
bad experiences, so they didn't want to make shitty games anymore after the old ones. So
Which I still enjoy playing, but they're just not the best games.
Yeah, but I love the South Park RPGs, and this is also published by
The Stick of Truth
and
the
the
Fractured Butthole.
Yes, really, really good games. This is not as in-depth as those games, but it's like basically a deck, like a card builder kind of game. So there's PvP battles as well as a single-player mode, and you go through, lay your cards out, and every time you play a card, it has a timer.
Okay.
Once the timer clears out, card goes back into the bottom of your deck, and you're just you're building a party. It's like an RPG battler kind of thing.
Cool, so it's similar to like Hearthstone or like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon back in the day?
It reminds me a lot of playing Pokemon.
Or Magic.
I haven't played any other card games. Well, I played some Magic. It's very similar to all those games, except there's a visual element.
Cool.
And it's full of piss and shit jokes, like everything else we covered today.
Yeah.
And the thing I like the best about it is there's no ads.
Really? Was it a free game?
It's a free game. There are
shit.
optional ads. You can sometimes watch ads for an extra boost.
Okay.
But they have timeouts between the sessions where you can actually watch ads. But you can only do that like once or twice a day. You can't just like watch ads all the time. So it's like a surprisingly responsible mobile game. It kind of de-incentivizes being addicted to it.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah, really good game, and it's free.
Well, I'm happy that you shared with me what you've been playing, Matt, and I'd love to know from you, the audience, the gamers. What have you guys been playing? Let us know in the comments. Have a suggestion for a new game you'd like us to give a shot or have you played? Put it down in the comments. Thanks for watching.
Goodbye. Goodbye.